Royal Obiang, Berlin. Tomorrow is a lovely day there from Alboli. The flight was formed at Biggin Hill in 1957, and it was formed to commemorate the summer of 1940, which is, after all, one of the RAF's major battle honours. Which of the aircraft do you fly?
I fly the Lancaster, John.
Ah, the boss flies the Lancaster, does he?
That's right, yes.
Air shows with old planes are now popular leisure attractions. Loving and painstaking restoration means that many vintage machines can fly again. The crew and aircraft of the RAF Memorial Flight are the big stars of the display circuit, and pilots now find themselves almost showbiz personalities. Squadron Leader Tony Banfield is the new officer commanding the Memorial Flight. He's now the world's only qualified Lancaster skipper, and it's the end of his opening season. He's been meeting for the first time the people to whom the grim wartime history of these aircraft brings an edge to the nostalgia of air shows, like this one at Duxford.
And once again.
But it's not only flying that needs organisation and management within the flight. Each display or show needs careful planning.
But as boss of the flight, I have all the organisation of the flight to do, because all the other aircrew are part-timers who have full-time jobs at Coningsby, where we're based. They're either Phantom or Tornado pilots, and in their spare time they fly for the flight.
Because you have to be very, very thoughtful about the aircraft, I would imagine.
Indeed,
because they're not exactly young, are they?
No, they're vintage aircraft. We hope that they're going to carry on for many, many years to come, to be the memorial to all those people who served during the war and indeed gave their lives. So that we can preserve them for posterity, we only fly a very limited number of hours per year on them.
Another season ends. The flight leaves its final display at Duxford for its home base at Coningsby in Lincolnshire. Home again on the runway at Coningsby. The Lancaster has returned to base. It's the pride of the RAF's flight, taking part in over 140 displays throughout Britain and abroad. The aircraft won't fly again until March. These vintage aeroplanes must now be prepared for maintenance in the flight's vast hangar. The huge doors close on another season's flying. Ahead, a hard winter's work. One of the main attractions of the flight is the mystique of the famous Merlin engines that power most of the fighters and the Lancaster. These engines, developed by Rolls-Royce in 1933, have become a legend in their time. By now almost irreplaceable, each engine is painstakingly stripped and rebuilt. Meanwhile, the busy life of Coningsby as a frontline NATO station must continue. The Tornadoes of 229 Operational Conversion Unit go about their routine training. The jets roaring along the runway is a commonplace sound on this remote Lincolnshire airfield. The station commander, Group Captain Mike Elson, is determined to accommodate and maintain the memorial flight amidst the everyday tasks and escalating costs of Britain's defence.
Our view is that we are in the fortunate position of operating a piece of national heritage. It isn't a museum, and it isn't a flying display team. The aircraft themselves are absolutely priceless national treasures, which need to be flown and which need to be seen by the public, in my view, on every possible occasion. Now, that isn't quite the same as, say, the Falcons or the Red Arrows, where you have a highly professional, high-visibility display team demonstrating to the public a specifically RAF skill, if you like.
Group Captain Elson believes that the differing role of the memorial flight from other RAF display teams is not sufficiently recognised.
You can't really equate the Red Arrows with BBMF. One is a professional formation display team. The other is a series of aircraft appearing at various times throughout the year. I don't believe that BBMF is given enough credence for the enormous amount of PR work that it does. I think it deserves to be treated as one of the major display teams that we have.
Okay, the mission details.
The men who fly the historic aircraft in the summer season are drawn from Coningsby's everyday crew. Flight Lieutenant Jack Hamill will be briefing Phantom crews in the ops room one day and maybe flying a Hurricane the next.
Figure 1 of 9,000, which is how it goes at figure...
Squadron leader Paul Day has flown fighters for over 20 years, with over 350 hours on the Spitfire and Hurricane. He's currently an air combat instructor with 228 OCU at Coningsby, flying Phantoms. Preparing for modern warfare with the 1,400 miles an hour Phantom is far removed from the routine of fighter pilots of 40 years ago. Today, it's G-suits and anti-fallout gear, and no longer leather helmets and goggles. As Paul Day takes off for another mission over the North Sea, thoughts of the Hurricane and the Spitfire are left behind. This is training for modern warfare in the front line. Over at the Memorial Flight's more peaceful hangar, each aircraft goes through a final air test before winter work begins in earnest. Today, the Mark 19 Spitfire, capable of 439 miles per hour, is to have its final fling.
Be careful. First takeoff.
Warrant Officer Barry Sears is the chief engineer of the flight, and it's his task to brief every test.
All controls. All controls. All right, I'll just take a quick look at the paperwork and the restrictions on it. 121 as normal, and the normal BBMF.
Fighter leader Paul Day is to put the Spitfire through its paces before engineering work begins.
I think it is probably the only aeroplane I know of that absolutely lives up to the legend. It's now extremely rare, a classic, and of course it's a great privilege to fly one for the RAF, bearing in mind that people who wish to do it privately need an awful lot of money to do it. It's rare and it's a great privilege. Any aeroplane basically talks to you and, if you like, tells you when it's going fast, tells you when it's going so slow it doesn't like it anymore. What it really does is takes you back to basics in terms of you've no longer got power hydraulics, you've no longer got air conditioning, you've no longer got inertial navigation aids. So it takes aviation back to basics, teaches you exactly what you've forgotten in 15 years.
A graceful flight on a fine afternoon is far removed from the real purpose of these war machines of the 40s. In the early weeks of the Battle of Britain, RAF Fighter Command could only muster 600 Spitfires and Hurricanes against the full might of the German aggression. In the end, 900 of these aircraft perished in the battle. The memorial flight exists to preserve the memory of those who died in the air war against Germany. Group Captain Bobby Oxspring was in the thick of the battle over Kent. The Spitfire is his living link with the past.
It means everything to me. My career was the Air Force, and Spitfire was my chariot of the time, so to speak.
You were very young at the time. Did you have any fear as you scrambled for another mission?
Oh, yes, I think we were all pretty scared. But there was so much to be done after getting airborne that one tended to forget that.
The famous Hurricane was responsible in the Battle of Britain for knocking out 3/5 of enemy aircraft. Squadron leader Ginger Lacey flew Hurricanes throughout that time.
It was a job that had to be done day by day. You see, there'd never ever been an air war before. And we'd started off, my squadron had been started off in France. We were fighting daily, came back just in time for the Battle of Britain, carried on fighting daily. We never had any relief during the whole of that time. So we thought that was what a air war was like. It just went on and on and on and on and on without any respite whatsoever. We'd have carried on till this day if necessary. Oh, it's a beautiful piece of machinery. It's a complete collection of non-essential parts. When I say that, at various times I've had them all shot off and it still flew back.
The detailed maintenance schedule for this collection of non-essential parts is coordinated by Warrant Officer Barry Sears.
The aeroplane, of course, has not flown since December 80, and I really think it's time that we've got to put a lot of pressure on the aeroplane and get it hopefully airborne next season. I know the engine has been out. How far have we got with that, John?
I've taken the engine out to do NDT on the bearer bolts, and I've got to finish off frame 5. When that's completed, we'll put the engine back and carry on with the connections and the trial installation.
I can see that we're going to be quite likely held up on the electrical side on our machine. What I would suggest is if you'd have a word with British Aerospace, have a word with John Bushby, and just see how far they're getting ahead with the drawings, because without them, I don't see that we'll get ours flying in March as we're hoping to.
Meanwhile, in the hangar, work progresses on the Hurricane. Stripped for inspection, she was the last of over 14,500 to be built by July 1944. She's powered by a massive Merlin engine, and the BBMF engineers leave no nut unturned. Air Force technician Corporal Pete Jeffrey is particularly drawn to the aircraft.
They've got soul, as far as I'm concerned. Its character, it's the same syndrome as a diesel engine, which is lifeless to me, a jet, and a steam engine. They're back to basics, so you've got to learn or relearn a lot of skills you tend to forget, whereas components are readily available for Phantom, say, from stores. Perhaps we have to manufacture our own.
So you really enjoy it?
Love it. I wouldn't swap it for anything else. I'd rather work on washing machines, to be honest. It's a second bite of the cherry as far as this outfit's concerned, and for me, there's nothing else.
Perhaps the hangar is an unusual place to find senior aircraft woman Gwen Hutchins, who's just joined the flight as an engineer.
I've been in the Air Force nearly 2 years, and I've worked on other aircraft, and I just came here and saw the engines, which is my trade. I found them fascinating. Really good engines, great to work on. You can pull these to bits, but on the Phantoms and Tornadoes, you just change components. Not really constructive. It's great. I mean, this one flew in the Battle of Britain, and to me that is really fascinating. It's great.
Such is the pressure on the Memorial Flight's engineering facilities that some of the work is contracted out to commercial specialists. Here at Cranfield in Bedfordshire, one of the Spitfires is in for a complete strip-down. All fighters need a major overhaul every 6 years. Every single component and mechanical part is taken down and inspected. Few will have seen a Spitfire in this state since the day she was built. This exacting work away from Coningsby is supervised throughout the programme by Warrant Officer Sears.
Oh, good morning, Murray.
How do you?
Fine, thank you.
Well, it looks a bit different now, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Yes, well, as you can see, one of the major problems down on this tailplane is the fact that the skin's damaged to the extent where we've had to remove it.
You found that when you took the paint off, obviously.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes. And also, in the removal of the tailplane, we did find that a number of the attachment bolts also were unserviceable.
We always have problems. If you were to ask me, hand on heart, I would say today I do not have any spares problems because all the aeroplanes are complete and we have everything that we need. Unfortunately, tomorrow, whichever bit goes broken is the panic piece of the day, and I've therefore got to try and get hold of one. We hold a fair amount of spares which have been accumulated over the years, and we obviously draw upon them. They're not all serviceable, they're in various states of disrepair, and what we have to try and do is take 3 or 4 and make one from it. I have a fair amount of stuff given to the flight, by Mr. Public, who just says, would you like this? Would it help to keep the aeroplanes flying? And we pick up stuff that displays, quite often in original boxes that they spend a lot of good money for, and give it to us to keep the machines going.
The Panton brothers, farmers from Lincolnshire, actually own a Lancaster, now grounded and guarding the gate at RAF Scampton. The brothers have allowed the BBMF to cannibalise their aircraft. Their reward, a flight in the real thing.
Oh, well, it was absolutely fantastic. It's hard to explain, really, but I've been waiting 40 years for a ride in a Lancaster, and I said to my brother, Harold, when I go in there, I'm going to cast my mind back 40 years and try and visualise exactly what it was like when they used to be taking off 40 years ago.
What did you think? Well, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Very high regard for all those young men in the war who flew it. My regard is the highest still, if it possibly could be. We've got to be thankful for. And if this aeroplane brings to mind a son or a brother or a father, it's worth every penny of it, I'm sure of that.
Now, the flight relies very heavily, doesn't it, on bits and pieces from your own aircraft?
Yes.
What has actually come
Yeah,
here?
well, we haven't let them have bits and pieces, just small pieces, nothing major, but just enough to keep it, I gather, to keep it going anyway, and we should do. We couldn't just let it be stood for the sake of a spare part.
Flying 140 displays a year and at the same time restricted to 75 hours a season, the Lancaster leads a busy life at the BBMF. The man at the helm, Squadron Leader Tony Banfield, has to run the flight on a tight budget of £400,000 a year from the RAF.
The future development of the flight, given the same budget, is difficult to see how we could do much more than we are at the moment. In comparison with the Red Arrows, for instance, who operate the same number of aircraft that we do, 10, our manning and the resources which are committed to the flight are derisory. There's no doubt that we are the poor relations in that respect.
The Lancaster is a lonely aircraft, much in demand and yet the very last of a breed.
Being in charge of the only Lancaster is an awesome responsibility, in fact. It may not sound quite that way to the layman, but the amount of emotion that this Lancaster generates in a certain section of the public makes it a fearsome thought that I may, inadvertently, damage it. I would hate to become famous that way.
As the only one flying, few people are permitted a view of its nostalgic and claustrophobic interior, just as it was those 40-odd years ago.
And we get inside. Once we're inside, we'll look back to look at the tail gunner's position. Difficult to get into, but to get over the tailplane, over a gap there, past control runs, and finally all the way into his little cabin there. In many ways it was the easiest position to get out of during the war, but of course it was also the most dangerous position, and more tail gunners got the chop than I think almost any other aircrew category. Having cleared the upper turret, this is the last time you can actually stand upright, because you now get to the large step up on top of the bomb bay, which is about 3 feet. You get up there, and one really has to keep your head down here all the time, moving forward, bulkheads to take care of. They can produce quite a lot of blood, especially if you forget in a hurry. This is the rear spar, which is a minor obstacle, really, in comparison to the next one. The fuselage is coming down on you all the time. We get up here now to the infamous main spar, and there's only about 2'6" between the roof and the spar here, with a very, very large bulkhead. Again, a good blood producer. Over the main spar, and down to the wireless operator's position. Having got over there, you must, of course, again, remember to keep your head down, coming forward, through to the navigator's position, into the navigator's position, and at last you can stand upright before coming into the main office. Right, we now move forward to get into the actual centre of activities and something of a gymnastics. Left foot over the control column, right knee past the throttles and pitch levers, get in position, and finally we can sit down. It's been a long journey, but we made it. And it's even worse going the other way. And it would be worse still wearing full World War II flying clothing, boots, wearing a parachute, chest-type parachute, aircraft perhaps on fire at night, all the lights gone out, in a spiral dive. My heart goes out to the people who flew these airplanes. They were wonderful people.
There is no replacement for that Lancaster, nor indeed for the two Hurricanes. We are always aware of the responsibility of that, and since I think it's important that we do keep the flight and what it stands for, a memorial to the 100,000 people who died in aircraft like that, I think it's important to keep that to some extent in the forefront of people's minds. Then we will certainly go on giving it the attention and the care that it deserves at station level.